So I will thank everyone for joining our first PIRE webinar. And I wanted to especially thank Ramesh and hopefully Matt. Are you there, Matt?
I am indeed.
Okay, welcome. It's nice to hear you and have you join us. And Ramesh, do we have you online also?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you both. And I know it's the end of the semester and everyone's quite busy or at least getting close to wrapping things up. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. I wanted to kind of overview where we're going to go today with the webinar. And first we're going to talk about Arizona's process that we took to we initiated this spring semester to recruit students for the PIRE project. And then we're going to look both at the outcomes based on our experience, the students that we were able to recruit and what that looked like. And then our evaluation team is going to walk us through the PIRE evaluation plan. So we started our approach this spring, and I think it'd be accurate to say that we had high ambitions and we kind of struck out boldly. Our objective was to develop a process, and the intention was to recruit underrepresented students, meaning students that don't normally show up or make themselves available, the ones that don't come up and talk to you either in your office directly or after class, that type of thing. And how we generally defined underrepresented students was in terms of gender, ethnicity, first generation, disability, and veteran status. And from the PIRE side, the project side, we had a few meetings with campus representatives to start talking about what this would look like, who had connections or resources, contact with the students that we were interested in. And although that, they kind of helped us put things together and alerted us to things that we needed to consider, I would say that our process didn't require a lot of meetings per se, as much as it did just a lot of follow-up contact. So I just wanted to kind of overview the approach we took. Following the meetings, we developed a flyer that the different campus groups distributed to all the students. They posted on their Facebook, their social media sites, and as well as, physical copies across campus. And we connected with over 19 campus groups, and this ran from different STEM groups as well as a whole range of student groups that support underrepresented students, from veterans to women in science and engineering. We worked with the NASA Space Grant, as well as quite a number of organizations set up to identify students of different ethnicity groups, as well as gender-focused groups. So I would say that the majority of the effort was spent connecting with these lead people via email, as well as spending probably not enough time. If I were to critically evaluate our process, we probably didn't spend enough time connecting with academic advisors. And in the end, that ended up being kind of a learning opportunity for us, in that we would have spent maybe a little bit more time there. The other thing I would note is that we started our process in January or February, and we made our application available to students in mid-March. So what happened between January and February was all of this development phase, and the flyer got sent out to students right after spring break. So the flyer and the announcement was shared via social media and word of mouth, that type of thing. And students had about 2 weeks to submit their applications online. We used Qualtrics, and the information we gathered was largely related to just general student information, as well as we asked students of 6 different possible research areas where they would like to participate. And we also gathered information about whether they wanted to receive credit or for pay. And then we asked them to submit a short personal statement. And again, this was all done online. Students had about 2 weeks to complete their application. And I will also add here that we, I added the flyer that we used to the slide we're looking at right now. I think if I were to go back and critically evaluate it, our flyer worked pretty well. Our Qualtrics form worked well in terms of what we saw from students in contacting us and submitting their application. The areas that were that we would look to refine next time would be, we didn't prepare in advance a quick snippet or keywords for social media. And that's really how a lot of student groups advertise or connect with students now, is via Instagram or Facebook, those types of linkages. So we didn't have that ready to go. We kind of relied on the flyer to be emailed or added to listservs, that type of thing. So in hindsight, we would have done that differently as well. I think that there's a few other things that we learned along the way that we're going to talk about as we get further into the evaluation. And so what I would like to do now is hand off to our evaluation team to talk about the outcomes that we got from the experience.
Rosie, may I ask something or comment on something before we move on?
Sure.
Could we make the Qualtrics form and the flyer available to our partners in case they were interested in doing something like this, and a more unified application process, and being able to reach out to minority groups across campus so that we don't duplicate effort?
That would be great. So I did open up the Qualtrics form so that I can share it with everyone. So I can post that link. It is in the slides, but I can put it on Teamwork as well, and the flyers in Teamwork also, but I can send those out as quick links so everyone can get those more readily.
Okay, thanks.
There we go. Great. Hi, Michele Walsh. I'm part of the evaluation team. My colleagues are here as well. Kara Tenoy, Violeta Dominguez. We're kind of a great computer to do this around. So they'll be jumping in when you hear disembodied voices coming in from either side. That's who's speaking. So as Rosie mentioned, we decided to gather data about this process, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we'll be using this over the course of the entire PIRE project. But for this, we wanted to see if we were actually reaching a different pool of students than we might otherwise. And so in looking at who, there we are, we looked at who was coming. We were looking specifically for juniors and seniors. Not surprising, we got them. Good that we've got juniors who might stay with us a little longer. We asked them about whether they were interested in a paid internship, a 4-credit internship, or either. And most of them were pretty flexible. Over half of them were, and what they were willing to take. And then where they heard. So the ones who did go through the process and how they heard. So typically they would, with the regular process here at Arizona, again, your processes that you already have in place may be different, and we can talk a little bit about that at the end. But here, most of the recruitment for RAs is typically through the PIs, and you mentioning it in your class, reaching out to them, folks coming and knocking on your door in office hours. And about a quarter of them who applied through here did hear it through the traditional means. But we did have a bigger proportion of them who did hear through the academic advisors. As Rosie mentioned, we reached out to a few of them, and we'll make a even more targeted effort for them, because of course the academic advisors know these students. They know what their goals are, they know what might be a good fit, and so they're a particularly useful set of people to be aware of your project, to know what you're trying to do, and to be able to convey that to the students. And so we did have folks through there. We also did have 3 of our students who were part of ASEMS, which is the Arizona Science, Engineering, and Math Scholars Program, who provide opportunities for students from a number of the underrepresented groups we're talking about here. And so again, another key group they were really pushing the project with. So 3 of them we got from there who we might not have otherwise. Some heard department emails, others, it was a drop. Again, they were cryptic, we weren't quite sure what they were talking about, but others were. So those were the primary ways that they reported having heard about it. We still got mostly guys, only 2 females applied, only 2 women. But we did see a nice group of first generation students who are part of the target and part of the NSS target too. We used, when we put in the categories, we used required categories from here at the University of Arizona for underrepresented students. They were trying to get consistency across the university and who asked what. And so we also asked for international first generation students, which is something they do here at the U of A. And that's students whose parents have a bachelor's degree or higher from a university outside of the U.S. So it's a little different definition of first generation. I think actually a number of our guys in this project would meet those criteria. So, again, about a third of them weren't first generation students. We did have a primarily non-Hispanic applicants, but about 30% were, so about 6 of our students. Here at Arizona, we are a Hispanic serving institution. So our numbers there might be expected to be a little higher than other places, but they're not typically still showing up at the rates that we expect in STEM fields. And so that we did get about 30% is pretty good here. And then, so they also split, because it's the standard asking, they split the race and ethnicity question here. So over half of our applicants were white. For the underrepresented students definition in the STEM field, both white and Asian students are not considered underrepresented. So the other categories are. And we also asked about veteran status, and we did have 2 vets who applied. And veterans are one category of folks who can participate in that ASIM, the Science, Engineering, and Math program. So they also focus on veterans. So looking at that, we did find that from our applicants at least, more than 3 out of 4 of those who were applying met that one of those criteria for being underrepresented by using the approach that we did. So we were pretty happy with that.
However, Michele, if I ask, gender is still a major problem.
Yeah, gender is definitely an issue. And yeah, I think Rosie will talk a little bit more about that. So one of the interesting pieces that we mentioned before is the sort of the typical way that you might get students. So we looked at and compared those who were participating through our usual route of reaching out by the PIs in their classes and those kinds of recruitment efforts. And we did see that when we looked at those other sources that we put some effort into, they did tend to look more diverse by these criteria than did the students who came through the usual pathway. So those were all those applying. And then for the selection process, we also looked at who were selected. And these were selected on the basis of the applications alone directly, right? Not interview process. That's correct, right? And so 7 were either directly selected or the alternates. And again, you can see that based on that, this was not information that the PIs were privy to beyond what the students had written in their reports about themselves, in their descriptions about themselves, or other kinds of identifiers. But as you can see, 30% of those did come from those academic advisors again, and nearly half of them came through the ASIMS recruitment. So again, that female, there's only 1 female. So in that, we had 2 applicants, and one of them were selected for this process. So that's what Demetrius was referring to, that we still have some challenges there. But a number of the students did meet those other criteria for being underrepresented by those definitions. And that's, again, just the one, but that sort of summarizes what we found. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Violetta.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one quick piece, and Rosie, you might talk about this during the lessons learned part of this conversation, but one thing that some of the categories, some of the language that you'll see in the Qualtrics survey that we use, the Qualtrics form that we use for recruitment, were required by the University of Arizona HR, the human resources, as this process was taking place here, and the team got in touch with the human resources department. There were some things that were required, and those might be different in each university. It's just something to be aware of, that there are some circumstances here at the U of A where the team was required to ask some of these questions in a specific way. That might be different in other institutions depending on what hiring requirements are, because these students were seen as students to be hired. It's just something to keep in mind as if this is a process that you may try in your own institution.
And Rosie was going to take us through some of the the team learned.
So I know that we've touched on a few of these things. Some of the things I wanted to talk about is that going in, I think we were very optimistic, and we were really committed to developing the process. And putting the pieces together took some time. It was an investment, but the way that we look at this is that that was hopefully a one-time thing, that we won't be repeating that every semester. It won't require that type of investment cycle or time in order to connect with the campus groups. But what we look to do in the next iteration of this is to kind of refine our approach. And some of the things I think we would like to do differently is, obviously the first thing is we'll start much earlier so that we catch students before they already have other opportunities or are otherwise engaged or just distracted with the semester. And that, it was a first time learning process, putting the pieces in place, so it was an extended period, but we don't see that repeating. Also, we would just kind of shorten the time frame between the point at which the student submits their application and we review and then follow up. We kind of probably that was extended more than we would like to see, so we would like to make that happen more efficiently going forward. The other things that I think would be important is we didn't spend a lot of time or focus on looking at transfer students that come in from our community college system or even other smaller colleges or universities. And I think that those might be key students to target that would, also be underrepresented and might be interested in this type of experience. Another area that I think we need to focus on is many of our campus partners emphasized that connecting with the students that we were targeting really requires repeated efforts, repeated contacts, the information getting back to them from multiple sources as well as multiple exposures. And we didn't really have the time to make that happen. And I think when we cycle this back out again, we'll be able to do that. And I know we mentioned academic advisors, and Michele hit on that, how much a key they are. They really do have the connection with students, the relationship. They often have the face-to-face contact that other groups don't seem to have as much. So those are the key areas. And then, I mentioned that in the slide that we need to start earlier than we think we need to. We will start at the beginning of the semester, but when you develop the process initially, it is an investment, and it's, it will pay off going forward, but you do have to spend a little time putting it together. So those are the lessons that I think we learned. I don't think that we're naive enough to consider that there won't be other lessons going forward, but we are anxious to re-implement the process come this fall, because we're really excited about the opportunities that we have for students, and we do want to reach the target group that we are interested in, just opening up these research opportunities for students that don't normally avail themselves to this type of thing. So can I pass this back off to the evaluation team?
Sure, we'll take it. There we are, come on. Oh, of course, now. There we are, okay. So sometimes we have trouble with our camera, so we put pictures up there, and just in case it didn't work this time. But as Rosie mentioned a bit about lessons learned, and that's really what we see our role here as part of the PIRE project as the evaluation team, the education evaluation team. How can we help improve the process for the team, the students? How can we really meet a lot of the goals and educational objectives that we've had? Just to give you a little bit of background on us, we are here at the University of Arizona. We are part of a group called the Community Research Evaluation and Development Team. We're actually have a focus on evaluation, and we work with a number of both university and community partners across the university. So we work across a lot of different content areas. None of us are astrophysicists or computer scientists or anything along those lines. So we're not content experts. We're really focused on looking at the education side. What are the opportunities that are being made to the students, and how is that improving? And part of the reason that we're doing that, one, is to really get feedback to you about how you're doing with student involvement. We will be asking and talking with your students, doing some surveys. We'll explain what those are and the timeline for those. But the goal is really to get some feedback to you all, to put some information in your hands to help you improve the process. So it's not to come in and give you a report card. It's like, oh, good, bad, no, not to give it to NSF to like yank our funding or not yank our funding. It's really very much around the improvement piece and assessing how, as a whole, we're meeting those educational objectives and to put tools in your hands to help you do that better. And the reason we're doing that is because it does matter to NSF. So, and one of the things I was just last fall at a conference, an evaluation conference that NSF were presenting at, one of the concerns that they had is that for all the millions they've put into projects, not necessarily PIRE, but across all of these as they move to that idea of broader impact and reaching and diversifying the STEM workforce, for all the millions they've put in, they hadn't been changing things very much. They haven't really been changing the proportion they felt. And part of the reason is they felt that people were giving lip service to that area of increasing diversity in many cases, that there hadn't been a lot of targeted efforts, that people weren't doing anything really differently to reach out in spite of the fact that that might have been a goal of theirs. And so that was in coming into this project, and why we spent so much time talking here about recruitment is working with the PIs to brainstorm around them, to have them think through, well, what would look different if we were doing it differently? And I think some of the efforts that are happening here at Arizona did pay off. I think it is looking differently than it would have otherwise. And so that's some of the things that we're going to point out to NSF that's a little bit different about this project, how seriously they're taking those efforts and really owning those. Evaluation in general matters to NSF as well. They will be doing a site visit in year 2 that's specifically focused on evaluation from what we understand, and that they will also be coming in and having some additional evaluation efforts towards the end of the project, year 4 and 5. So in the meantime, we'll be reporting to them what we're seeing around the educational efforts that hopefully will influence what they feel that they need to do for you all and not duplicate those efforts as well. So we hope we can guarantee that from them. So with that background, so what are we planning to evaluate? As we mentioned, we're looking specifically at the educational components of the education evaluation team. You all know the science, but we can help you think through some of these other pieces. And so looking at both the undergraduates who are involved, as we're starting to describe here with this process, but also your graduate students and what it is that they're doing and how it is that they're engaging with the process. Postdocs as well. We'll be looking at each of the webinars and hackathons as they come through and doing brief evaluations of those. the summer and in this case this year, the winter schools, to what's happening there, who's engaging, who's coming to those, how's the participation going, and also trying to capture the exchange visits. Because a big PIRE piece, as you know, is that opportunity for students to be engaging in things that they wouldn't be engaging necessarily at their home institution, especially the international component when those that happen. So this is our plan, and we'll send these out. We'll also write up a brief description as well for sending out to each of the projects, but also sending these slides that outline what we think is going to happen. And again, harking back to what Rosie was saying about this being, you know, a try it and see. So part of the feedback and the reason that we're starting so early around the evaluation process and working so closely as part of the team is so that we can refine this process and figure out what's working for the evaluation and what isn't working for the evaluation. But stepping through, as we mentioned, working with both the undergrads, the grads, the postdocs, and with the co-investigative teams. And we know these aren't necessarily always just the co-Is, but other folks who are involved in the process. And part of it will be identifying who those are in each of the institutions. The red piece are the expectations of the co-Is and their school level team members. And so knowing who's applying for research assistantships, we mentioned earlier for those of you who are part of the earlier co-investigator meeting that there'll be a need to log who are the involved students. We're trying to keep it very low effort on the co-investigators portions. We know that the science is a big part of your focus, and so we're trying to keep the burden low for the information that we need. But we will need to know who is involved so that we can reach out to them. And we can talk a little bit about this at the end of the webinar, but for those who are looking to use more non-traditional venues for recruitment, we'll most likely put together just a checklist of the kinds of things that we were talking about earlier, just to see if those are anything that you were interested in doing and actually did as part of your recruitment. Then the undergrad students, once we have names for them, will be given a registration form. Grad students will also receive one. And for we are leaning a little heavier on the undergrad students. You're giving them a great opportunity. So we think it's okay for them to put in a little effort around these kinds of evaluation activities. So we are going to start them off with a survey that we follow up with again at the end of the semester to look a little bit at their intentions to stay in the field and their intentions to take more courses in the STEM field. That's a big NSF focus, so that's why we're looking at that. And then trying to, for those who've been involved for a while, trying to look at what their trajectory is. So it's some kind of annual survey for those who've been involved at the undergraduate level. And then any who may be participating in the summer schools, when they do, we would also be looking at those too afterwards. Grad students, a similar piece about registration, but then as we talked about and as the project evolves and we see more how this goes, but the idea that the grad students will be mentoring those undergraduate students, that's, you know, I know at least in the initial conversations and the way that we looked at the project, that that's part of the goal. So surveying them, potentially interviewing them about how that mentoring process went. And then thinking of them not only as mentors, but being mentored by either the postdocs or the co-Is, and a little bit about their experiences there, and then following them over time as well. And then if any of them are participating in exchange visits, then we'll also be seeing how those visits went. Again, not a super burdensome piece, but looking at those experiences. So again, requiring the co-Is, whoever it is who's sending somebody on an exchange, to let us know that that's happening, or else we won't be able to trigger that piece of the evaluation. Your postdocs too will hopefully be looking at, and the co-investigators on the project will have still, as I mentioned, still working on whether it may, in some instances, need to be more than annual. But our goal right now is at least an annual survey and not more frequent than biannual, as well as something about the summer school and how that process went. So those are the sort of the overview of what we're hoping to do. So then again, what we need from co-investigators is that piece of knowing who's participating in the project, both in the longer term, and by longer term we mean at least at a semester level. With undergrads, you might be recruiting into labs, the grad students who are working with you, as well as those shorter term exchange visits. And we'll make sure that you have the access to where those are on teamwork. And again, it's just on those, it's just the name and email address for the student and the semester that they're starting with you, so that we know to reach out to them, and we'll take care of the rest. The other thing that we really need from the co-investigators, from the postdocs, from the grad students and all, is this commitment to evaluation and to be able to talk about it being important. That it really is, you know, again, feedback for you all to help improve the engagement of students with it, and to show and assess what you're doing on that piece, which is a very important outcome to them. So what we really are asking is that you do a bit of a hard sell on evaluation. When you've got somebody new in your lab, let them know that that is part of the process, that that's an expectation for being part of the lab, and part of the thrust is to complete these. Again, on our end, we're trying to make them not too burdensome, and to make them pretty closely related to the what we told NSF we're going to be looking at over time, so that they are very relevant and not too long. So if from our end you make that commitment, we hope from your end you can make the commitment to really stress the importance of this, and that then you also internalize that and participate yourself in the annual assessments that we'll be doing, because those will be very important. And we will, again, from our end, commit to getting some of this information back in your hands. So when we do the webinars and the hackathons, our goal is to turn around a brief evaluation report. Here's how it went, so that when it's your turn to put one on, you'll know what went well and what was challenging. Then there may also be more ad hoc feedback that when we look through the student surveys and at end of semester, if there's something that we want to point out that could be improved, or that were challenges, or that were raised about by students, we'll try to get that information back into your hands. We have an annual reporting obligation to NSF, and we'll be part of that. We'll have the evaluation as part of that, as well as being able to provide an overview during the winter and summer schools. We also know that the education committee, we anticipate working closely with them and providing them with any information that they need to help structure things, as well as whatever it is the advisory board needs to see from us when they meet. So those on our side are our goals for the project. So we thought we would just open it up. Rosie, is that right, for conversation, discussion? What is?
I think that's a great plan. I'm really anxious to hear how our project partners, such as Matt and Ramesh and David, see the evaluation component, what we've planned, as well as how they've either done student recruitment, or how they see it possibly unfolding within their projects and their research.
So I'm happy to just briefly share. This is Matt. I'm not sure that I have a lot to contribute, in the sense that I'm not personally recruiting anyone right now for the PIRE project at our side, but at the same time, I was very pleased to see the thoughtfulness that you used in your self-evaluation, and these are things that I want to use going forward on in our collaborations here, and also outside of the PIRE project as well. One thing I want to particularly commend you for is the opportunity that you made available to students for both paid and unpaid internships, which is a bit of a sticky thing sometimes because offering unpaid internships is is not recognized quite as much as it should be for how detrimental it can be to recruitment efforts. So I want to say, nice work on that. That's awesome.
I guess I could add one more point about the unpaid internships. At the University of Arizona, students can either be paid to participate in a research project, or if they want to sign up as independent study, they are not allowed to be paid for it. Otherwise,
sure.
It's double dipping. You either get paid or you pay to learn. So by unpaid internships are the students, I think we mean the students that choose to use it as credit towards their degree, as opposed to just as a side job.
Right. I was trying to say I'm glad that both options were offered.
Yeah. Is there any way that we can?
Sorry.
Go ahead, please, David.
Thank you. Well, on the side of Mexico, I think I'm the only person here. Laurent, Loinad, and William Lee, I think, are busy with other meetings. I would say, first of all, one thing that we're very much aware of in Mexico is that there is not enough participation on the part of Mexican scientists, both at the level of students, undergraduates, postdocs, and also faculty members. Putting that aside, I think this is a fantastic demonstration of how we should try to proceed and incorporate students into the project in Mexico at the various universities and institutes. At INOE in particular, where I'm based, we don't have any undergraduate students. All of our students are masters or PhD students, but certainly that is not the case at UNAM. Where William and Laurent are based, and so there are very good opportunities. And I think this is again, following Matt's comment, I think this is a wonderful demonstration of how things can be done, and it will be very good for us to basically take this as a template of both how to encourage students to participate, but more importantly, how to go through the whole evaluation process so that we ourselves, in front of CONACYT and also in front of NSF, can actually demonstrate the level of interest that we expect through the student community to participate in the EHT.
Let me also add that any material that we've prepared as part of this process, if you think it's useful, please feel free to use them. I saw that Rosie already shared them with you. Obviously, you could make any changes to the flyers, but we worked on wording in our application as far as self-identification, what we should be asking, and that's where our great evaluation team has been of tremendous help. Even the gender question, for example, whether we ask it as a binary or give other options, or just a variety of ways of thinking about diversity. So please feel free to use them. And I just want to echo one other comment that Rosie made. We found out, at least in our case, that reaching out to undergraduate advisors when the possibility of recruiting undergraduate students is present is really important. We noticed that a lot of them get guidance, not just their course schedules, but other things they need to be involved in on campus, or they could be involved in on campus through their academic advisors. So even though we tried countless of minority groups, Hispanic engineers and Black Students Association, etc., and we will keep on doing that once we have the email list, of course. Using our contacts and distributing them again is very little overhead. But I think if we were to do one thing, it would be at least having some good relationships with the undergraduate academic advisors who can then guide their students to these opportunities. At least that's our experience now. In 2 years, we might be someplace else. And hopefully we'll also see our diversity increasing. So it'll be interesting to see.
If I can just make one other final quick comment. I mean, just as with NSF, it's extremely important that all of their programs, including PIRE, can in some way quantify the value of the program, the funding, and the return that offers, not just through the scientific results, but also the generation of new scientists at all levels. The CONACYT, which is the equivalent of NSF in Mexico, we have very, very similar requirements as part of every scientific proposal that we write under different programs. So again, this the work that you've done is a very good template for us to use to begin to try and incorporate the same questions and the same methods into attracting students, and then being able to provide the appropriate follow-up so that we can see how they progress through the project, the value of the project to them, but also the value of the project more generally to the funding sources here that on the CONACYT side are also supporting the EHT project.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Since our focus is on the U.S. side, but we can absolutely make all the materials available on the evaluation side too, and again, helping to serve as a template for anything else that you all might be doing.
Well,
could I just interrupt? I know Dimitris was going to say something, but I'm just thinking. I sit on a number of panels where. And in discussions with essentially the equivalent of Franz Cordova and Richard Green at NSF, and on the CONACYT side, there's always a strong desire and initiative to create these binational collaborations, and so. At some point, I guess it would also be useful not just within the individual institutes and universities to quantify the participation and value, but also hopefully throughout the course of the EHT project and with the support of PIRE, also this particularly US-Mexico binational opportunities and transfers and exchanges of students and the sort of sharing the cultural aspects, the scientific sides of things. I mean, again, these are points that are sometimes difficult to quantify, but the value of them, but they are written into some of the questions that we have to respond to, even though they, as I say, they might be difficult to actually put a number or a value on it. But it will be certainly good to try and see how we can promote this binational part, at least US-Mexico. I understand there's many countries involved in the EHT and many different institutes, but the US-Mexican relationship, I think, is a particularly important one.
And David, this is Violeta with the evaluation team too. And that's actually, I think, a very interesting point because, and the co-investigators here at the U of A can talk about that, just but from the University of Arizona's perspective too, there's an UNAM campus here at the U of A in Tucson, and that relationship between the U of A and UNAM is also high priority. I mean, it's got a high profile too. So being able to think about how some of the data and some of the information we're collecting for the evaluation process can also be presented, or you can also tell that other story about that binational collaboration that might be relevant to people here and also at CONACYT or some other people at UNAM. So I think that's a very good point, just to keep in mind as we're looking at the different pieces of data we're collecting from students and what other audiences there might be for these evaluations.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to make the same point that David just did, that part of the PIRE is we want to demonstrate that we got a lot more as an international collaboration than if we were to fund it be funded individually by our funding agencies. And half of it is education. So I think demonstrating how the lesson that was learned in the US was applied in Mexico or was applied in Taiwan and vice versa is also going to be very critical for our success in our future.
Can I jump in? And I wanted to follow up to David's point and to encourage and maybe we need to think about how we provide the process or some mechanism to have learning that comes from CONACYT or UNOM or perhaps Matt and Ramesh as you do your research and involve students. We would love to have the learning come back the other way and encourage the flow of education going both ways from PIRE and back to, because I don't think any of us would suggest that our process was infallible or couldn't be improved. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think learning from external experiences and approaches would definitely strengthen how we go about what we're doing too.
I think we're all good.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending and for joining us. And all of the documents will be uploaded in Teamwork. This webinar will be available on YouTube soon. And if there's and the slides will be available as well. So if there's anything we missed, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you.